Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. On this channel, I've started covering the case of JonBenet Ramsey and some theories associated with her murder. I would have to say that this is probably one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in America, definitely one of the most famous unsolved murder cases, based on, the amount of coverage and press that this particular one got. But one of the things is, I got into this case in maybe 2014. It was about 4 years ago when I first started, going through things associated with JonBenet Ramsey, and then I, began following some other things, and then for the 20th anniversary, things got resurfaced, and now we're in 2018, and not much has changed, I would say. 4 years ago, a lot of people on the internet, in the comment sections and forums, they were really trying to point everything toward Burke Ramsey, JonBenet's brother, who was 9 years old at the time. But I would say that there's a very big thing that has changed in the last 4 years, just from totally a social observation. Before, people were really trying to focus in on Burke's mental state. There was an incident where he hit JonBenet in the head with a golf club, and people were trying to say that he was unstable, that he was out of control, that he was violent. The parents totally provided an explanation for that. They were at like a mini golf or a putt-putt course or some small type of golf course, and it was just an accident. Like, he didn't intentionally mean to hit her. They were playing, and it happened. But at the same time, there it is. So it's like people were really zoning in on that, and I read that so many times. It was Burke. He hit her in the head with a golf club. He had a violent temper. Well, I said not much has changed. People do focus in on that, and that is incorporated into the Burke Ramsey Murder Theory. But in 2018, a lot of stuff has come out. As I've been getting back into this, I was watching CBS's presentation on the JonBenet murder case, and they were really trying to nail Burke Ramsey for this. They were really trying to target him, as the prime suspect. And the things that they are putting forth are very simple. One of the biggest ones is, on the 911 call, Burke Ramsey could possibly be heard in the background. They really believe that they have Burke Ramsey's voice heard in the background on the 911 call. When you just listen to it, it just sounds like noise. But, they did some, audiography and, kind of like audio testing, and they really tried to decipher what was going in there, so using some sort of forensic audio analysis. And they say that, this voice is not from an adult, this is from a child. The only living child in the house at the time of the 911 call was Burke Ramsey. So, this also challenges John and Patsy Ramsey's story that Burke was asleep at the time, in his bed, asleep. And they're just like, well, what they're trying to say is that, why would the Ramseys lie about this? And yes, that's a rhetorical question. They would lie about it because, if Burke did murder her, then they would just make up that story that he was asleep the whole time, and, the parents were the ones who would stage the cover-up. The Burke Ramsey theory is also completely contingent upon Patsy Ramsey writing the ransom note. In all outcomes, in all of these sort of angles that I've seen on the Burke Ramsey theory, they're saying that Patsy Ramsey wrote the ransom note. And, on the first upload I did, I read off the questions posed by Lawrence Schiller in Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, and that's the second key question that he asks. Does the notepad that was used for the ransom note hold the answers? And what that sort of is going at is, that either Burke or someone in the house, murdered JonBenet, but most likely zoning in on someone like, did Burke Ramsey murder JonBenet, and did Patsy Ramsey write the ransom note? From all angles, that's really focusing in on a family member committed the murder, and Patsy Ramsey wrote the note to stage this as a cover-up. There's also a very, very important issue, though. I'm going to tell you flat out, I didn't believe any of the Burke Ramsey theories, ever. But it was like, some things are changing. The reason I didn't believe them is because I was just insistent upon something that, other people have talked about. Is it possible for a 9-year-old to strike someone in the head and cause an 8.5-inch crack in JonBenet's skull? Is that possible? Like, is he able to generate that kind of force? I mean, I always thought that the strike to JonBenet's head was from that of a grown man. And, like, I just was so doubtful and skeptical. And they did conduct a test on the CBS show, and they created sort of an artificial simulation. Like, they created an artificial skull and put a wig on it, and they brought in, like, a 10-year-old boy. Not 9 years old, but 10 years old. And they had him test this out. They had him strike the simulated artificial skull, and he produces a very similar result. He can cause that type of damage. The damage that was caused to JonBenet's skull could have been, it could have been a 9-year-old. It is possible. So, I just have to accept, the correction. I'm always open to correction, because one of the big things about these things is it's not about formulating a theory and then sticking to that to the absolute end of time. No, in things, when you're discussing true crime cases and you learn something new, you just have to say that, yeah, okay, I accept the correction, let's move forward. It is possible. I mean, there's no reason to say anything to the contrary. It is possible for a 9-year-old to have caused that damage from one single strike. Because the short sort of explanation that was put forth by Dr. Werner Spitz, I hope I'm getting his name right, is that, a 6-year-old has such a fragile skull, the bones still aren't fully developed at age 6, that it is possible for that damage to have been inflicted by almost anyone. A 9-year-old and an adult, anyone could have done that in one single strike to the skull. There are some other things that, we've talked about the likelihood of the evidence in favor of Burke Ramsey. Now, I'm going to say, though, the other thing that is just kind of shouting at me, I don't endorse the Burke Ramsey murder theory because DNA, I'm definitely entertaining it now as a possibility. In the past, I was like 1% chance. Now I'm more like 48% chance. But what about this overwhelming 3-letter thing that we have in the English language, DNA? What about the DNA that was found on JonBenet's leggings and JonBenet's underwear? And, they sort of examined this on 2020, and they were sort of like, well, some of it was touch DNA. There was touch DNA on JonBenet's leggings, which just meant that, some other man's DNA was found there from touch contact. And at first they were saying that, hey, all that means is some man could have touched her hand, and then when she put on her own leggings, she could have, transferred the DNA that way. Or John Ramsey shook hands with somebody and that ended up there that way. Or Patsy Ramsey. But, then they had some guy look at the reports, and the same person who was the same medical expert that was giving off that explanation, and then he was like, nope, no way. The judge was right to exonerate them. And the simple reason is, that is why the Ramseys were cleared. That is why they were sort of, exonerated, because they were like, there was some other man's DNA on JonBenet's underwear and on her leggings. And to me, that is almost more significant, that there was an intruder in the house. And yes, the Burke Ramsey theory is plausible, and I'm not going to lie to you, the handwriting analysis does not look good for Patsy Ramsey. I mean, there are some very peculiar things, like, when I just look at this stuff with my untrained eye, I'm kind of like, at first glance, I notice a few things that are similar and a few things that are drastically different. Like, I definitely don't see any sort of perfect matches. Granted, though, she does do that one thing called the misplaced capital, where, like, she uses capital L's when she should be using lowercase l's. I'm not going to lie to you, that is just like a giant red flag. And is it possible that Patsy Ramsey wrote the ransom note? I don't necessarily, I can't rule it out. I mean, there are definitely red flags, but I would say, though, that the handwriting on the ransom note is not a 100% match to Patsy Ramsey. Not a 100% match. And at the same time, what do we do about the boot print that has allegedly been traced to Michael Helgoth because of the very unique, high-tech print that was found? HITEC was found there. And it's just like, everything about the Burke Ramsey theory makes 100% logical sense. And I'm going to come around to some sort of counterpoint, but it would make sense why the ransom note has handwriting that looks like Patsy's. It would make sense about why she wrote $118,000, or I should say why the perpetrator wrote $118,000, because they knew that John Ramsey's annual bonus. It would make sense why they tried to cover it up. It would make sense why they didn't talk about pineapple, and they found pineapple in JonBenet's small intestine. And it's just like, the whole story that they've created, that narrative makes absolutely perfect sense. Burke is eating pineapple, and JonBenet grabs his pineapple with her bare hands, and they get into an argument, and then he strikes her in the head. And, that caused them. Then there's the fatal wound, and then just, all the events come into place. But then again, DNA. How did that other man's DNA that was not Burke's, that was not John Ramsey's, how did that other man's DNA get on JonBenet's underwear and on her leggings? More importantly, what about the boot print that was traced to Michael Helgoth, who committed suicide 2 months after the murder? It's almost like what a lot of people are saying who support the intruder theory, is that it was someone who got in there to commit some sort of sexual assault on JonBenet, which apparently some sort of molestation did happen. That's how he got his DNA on her underwear and on the leggings. But it's like the theory is really contingent upon two people. One of them has been identified as Michael Helgoth, a person who worked at his family junkyard outside of town, who had a property dispute with the Ramseys. And the second person, and they do say two people, because the DNA, as far as I know, was not Michael Helgoth's. I mean, otherwise it would be open and shut. But it's like, this is contingent upon two people, Michael Helgoth and an unknown associate of him, who, as far as we know, has not yet been identified, or definitely not been put forward as a suspect to the public. I'm not going to lie to you. Everything about the Burke Ramsey murder theory falls into place. It answers 99% of the questions, except for DNA and the boot print. It's like, if Burke Ramsey did not kill JonBenet, if Burke Ramsey did kill JonBenet, if he did do it, this 9-year-old boy, why is there someone else's DNA on JonBenet's underwear? And why is there someone else's DNA on JonBenet's leggings? And why are people talking about all these things of sexual abuse? And they have DNA from another person. Why is there a boot print, with the letters HITEC found at the scene that, has been traced to an individual named Michael Helgoth? What about those challenges and oppositions? Does that not suggest that this was more likely an intruder rather than Burke Ramsey? I'm going to tell you the most honest answer in the world. I do not know. I mean, we can guess. Like, I can't get rid of that DNA evidence and that boot print. And I'm going to keep going through some new things, because I like to put up these uploads as I explore, so we can sort of see the progression of events, the developments, the way, you think about it when you're exploring something. But that's all I can really say for now. And the Burke Ramsey theory makes sense. All the pieces fall into place. But is that just people trying to force a theory? Is that the whole notion of sliding a square peg through a circular hole? Is it like, are they trying too hard to force this and trying to nail Burke for this? I can't say 100%, but we're going to investigate a little bit more. So, stay tuned.